All right, guys, welcome back. Today we're going to be diving into chapter 10. Now, that's going to cover some of the things like network and authentication attacks. So, as you know, I'm John Haskell, and we're going to be breaking down these exploits as we go through this. So, our roadmap for today is going to be we're going to start with network attacks. Specifically, we're going to be looking at ARP poisoning, man in the middle attacks, and SSL stripping. From there, we'll move on to password attacks, covering brute force and password spraying, including some of the credential stuffing itself. And then we'll tackle Windows authentication vulnerabilities and look at some of those tools such as Hydra, Responder, Hashcat, John the Ripper, and go through it in the order. So let's look at the infrastructure level first. When we talk about live network attacks, we often are talking about manipulating the infrastructure itself. We're talking about intercepting traffic. Now, the primary methods that we use here are going to be ARP spoofing, man in the middle, and SSL stripping. So let's talk about those three specifically. ARP spoofing, or poisoning, is a classic way of redirecting traffic. So Address Resolution Protocol, ARP, maps an IP address to a MAC address, but it has a major flaw. It doesn't have a verification mechanism. The attack works by telling the victim that I am the router, while simultaneously telling the actual router I am the victim. So the result here is that all traffic will flow through your machine, setting you up as a perfect on-path attack, okay? Otherwise known as man in the middle. Now, once you are on the on path, once you are in the middle of the communication stream, you have a few options. The first is eavesdropping. Now, this means that we're going to read any unencrypted traffic like HTTP, Telnet, or FTP in real time. The second manipulation is modifying the data in transit. Like we can inject malicious HTML into a web page, or we can hijack in and steal session cookies to completely take over accounts. Now, what happens if the person's only using HTTPS? Well, we'll use a technique called SSL or TLS stripping, which is a downgrade attack. So in this scenario, a user may type the HTTP address and expecting the server to redirect him to HTTPS. But as the attacker in the middle, we're going to intercept and redirect. We'll connect to the server through HTTPS, but since we are attacker in the middle, the victim themselves will be connected to HTTP. So the server thinks everything's fine because we're connecting through HTTPS, but the victim will stay on an unencrypted HTTP tunnel. So we can use tools like SSL strip or BetterCap to do this. And then also what's great about this is because we're downgrading them into a non-encrypted tunnel, we can now read the data as it comes through the wire. All right, speaking of hijacking accounts, let's talk about session hijacking, and specifically session hijacking based off of cookie stealing. So if the traffic is unencrypted over HTTP, the session ID is in plain text. So this attack is pretty simple. We're going to sniff for the cookie, import it into our own browser, and then just refresh the page. If we do everything correct, we're now going to be instantly logged in as the victim without ever needing to know their password. Another attack we can deal with is MAC flooding. So if we're dealing with a switch and need to sniff traffic, we might need to do MAC flooding first. Switches are going to use what we call CAM, Content Addressable Memory, and this maps our MAC addresses to a specific port on the switch. But if we flood the switch with fake MAC addresses until the table fills up, it will break the switch normal operation, and it will normally fail open. Basically, the switch becomes a hub, broadcasting all network traffic through all ports. Now, if we are an attacker on this box or on this switch, we can now sniff everything on the switch itself, all traffic that goes through, because all traffic will go out all ports. Another redirection method we could use is DNS cache poisoning. Basically, go to the fake bank website attack. This is going to involve us injecting fake DNS records directly into the resolver's cache. When the user requests a legitimate website like google.com, the poison cache credentials will send them to an attacker IP address instead of the correct google.com. Pretty simple, but it's a very powerful attack because we rely on DNS quite often. Now, if we get off the network layer a little bit, we can talk about the keys of the kingdom. Password attacks itself are very unique, but they happen all the time. We'll look at different types of attacks, like online versus offline attacks. We'll talk about the techniques like spraying and stuffing. And then we'll look at a couple tools like Hydra, Hashcat, maybe some Mimikatz. Now remember, we're going to properly practice these in our lab techs within our labs for today, okay? Now, it's critical for us to understand the difference between an online and an offline cracking technique. Online cracking involves guessing against a live login page. So we're talking about SSH or even a web portal. Now the pros on this is we don't need any prior access, but the cons are very significant. It can be slow, incredibly noisy, and can easily trigger things like account lockouts or alerts. Now, offline cracking means we have stolen the hash and we can use our other hardware like our GPU. The good things about this is it's stealthy, extremely fast, because we can often guess billions of guesses in a second. The only downside is we have to have the hash first. But if we can get the hash, offline is definitely going to be the go-to method. Now, there are two very common techniques for guessing for brute force and dictionary attacks, right? For these password attacks. Brute force password attacks literally try every combination of characters. It's guaranteed to work eventually, but it's slow, especially for long passwords. Dictionary attacks use a word list. The famous one that we like to use is normally the rocku.txt file. And humans are very predictable. They use real words and usually are fast using very simple patterns. And so that's why dictionary attacks are always so fast and highly effective. Now, let's say you have an online attack and you want to remain stealthy. You can use a technique called password spraying. Instead of trying 1,000 different passwords on a single user, that user is going to get locked out pretty quickly. You can try some common passwords on maybe 1,000 different users. For example, you might try winter 2023 exclamation point against an entire employee directory list. It works beautifully because it stays under the radar, because we're avoiding account lockout thresholds, because we're only sending a couple passwords as a user at any given point in time. And so we can try one password against a whole bunch of people and see if we can get at least one user account. Now, credential stuffing relies on simple human error. Users like to reuse passwords across multiple sites. And so what we'll do is we'll take that list of usernames and passwords from each, from a known data breach. And then let's say that breach came from, I don't know, an old LinkedIn dump. And then we'll take that password and we'll systematically try the same credentials on different targets like corporate VPNs or other accounts we're trying to get into as that user. All right, let's move on into a domain environment. Let's talk a little bit more about Windows authentication attacks. This is all about exploiting Active Directory, Trust, and some of the legacy protocols that Windows still use today. The heavy hitters here are going to be pass the hash, pass the ticket, and Kerber roasting. These are the ones that we're going to be talking about more in depth. Now, to understand those attacks, you need to understand how Windows authenticates. NTLM is the legacy challenge response protocol that relies on password hashes. It's vulnerable to pass-the-hash and relay attacks. Kerberos is the new modern standard. It uses a ticket-based system centered around the ticket granting ticket, otherwise known as the TGT. While more secure, it's still vulnerable to pass-the-hash, golden ticket, and Kerberosing attacks. So it uses one of these two methods. Now, most of the time, if you're using a domain account, we're talking about Kerberos. And if we're talking about over the network through like work groups, we're talking about NTLM. Okay. So pass the hash means we don't need a password. If we compromise a machine and dump the NTLM hash, you don't need to crack them. We could just use them. We could use the hash itself directly to authenticate to the machines on the network. Now, this is how attackers achieve lateral movement quite often, and they'll use tools like Mimikatz or PSExec to make this very easy. So you can see in the image here, we have a Mimikatz installation, and we actually dumped a hash here for an sfill. And you'll notice there's an NTLM hash right here, the D3B4 password. That's his password that's been hashed. Now we can take that hash and go figure out the password, or we could just try the hash. And most of the time, this is going to work to authenticate into different servers and infrastructures. Now we can pass the ticket as well. Now, pass the ticket is essentially just trying to steal a movie ticket, okay? You can extract a valid Kerberos ticket from a machine's memory and inject it into our own session. Once we inject it into our session, the domain controller believes that we're a user, and it just doesn't act like anything. It will just say, oh, we're already that user. We already have a valid ticket. We belong. Now, it will do that until the ticket expires naturally. So depending on the ticket expiration time on that ticket, you'll be able to authenticate through network resources and other things within the domain without re-authenticating. Now, Kerberos is a fantastic way to crack service accounts. Now, here's a couple steps of how we do it. Step one, we're going to request a service ticket from a service principal name, an SPN. The domain controller is going to hand us a ticket that is encrypted with the service account's NTLM password hash. Now, we don't know that hash, so what we're going to do is we're going to take the ticket and offline and crack it. Once we crack the password, we can then obtain the plain text password to the service account, which means, well, we can often have authentication to the services and maybe even administrative access, all depending on the service account here. So this is why, even though it's using a service account and not anyone really knows the password, it's one of those things that we always tell people, how about you use a secure password and still make sure that you rotate your service account passwords on a regular basis. Now let's talk about some of the tools that are essential for network and authentication attacks. And this is going to be mostly because of the Pentest Plus. So if you're studying for the Pentest Plus, make sure that you know these tools. Now, for the network, you're definitely going to need Wireshark. Wireshark is a GUI packet analyzer essential for visualizing traffic flows and spotting credentials, especially if they're in plain text. So this is one of our sniffers. Now, if we are on a Linux environment, you might be using TCP dump instead. This is a command line equivalent, perfect for capturing packets on remote servers, and, well, it doesn't need a GUI. And then for active attacks, we can use something called Responder. Responder is incredible. It acts as an LMNR poisoner or a NetBIOS poisoner that automatically steals the NTLMv2 hashes right off the network. There are different tools out there that have Responder built into it, and Burp Suite is one of them that has Responder built into it. So it's another way to capture hashes over the network. Now, for online attacks, if we're talking about password attacks, we can use Hydra. Hydra is the absolute standard. It's robust and it has an online brute forcing tool that supports pretty much every protocol we support or that we'll probably encounter. So whether or not you're trying to hack into SSH, FTP, RDP, HTTP, Hydra can do it for you. So if you're looking for a brute forcer, the Hydra tool can do this. A lot of times people will turn off account lockouts because it's easier for the IT infrastructure. And that's one thing that Hydra is really good for is we can hit it with thousands of passwords all at once and try to figure out, hey, is there a weak password on one of these services? Now, when it comes to offline cracking, you're going to have two main choices. You have Hashcat or John the Ripper. Hashcat is the GPU accelerated one. It's the fastest cracker in the world. If you have a great graphics card in your computer, you can use Hashcat and it will crack billions of attempts at any given point per second. It's really fast. Now, John the Ripper relies entirely on the CPU, but it remains incredibly valuable because it's fantastic. It's very fantastic at auto detecting hash formats. So instead of guessing what format this hash is and everything like that, John the Ripper can tell you, hey, this is a SHA-256, and it can go further with it by finding complex rule sets like the password policy for this company is using 8 to 12 characters, and it uses 3 of the 4 special characters, something in that nature. Now, finally, we're going to have Mimikatz. So this is the undisputed king of Windows credential dumping. What it will do is it will read the LSASS process. So you'll see that running as a service most of the time. And what's going to do is it's going to extract plain text, hashes, and tickets from memory. So some people ask me, well, how are you going to get those Kerberos tickets? Well, you can use Mimikatz to get those as well. Now, the command that we'll often use here is going to be SEKURLSA logon password. So you can see it here in red on the slide. Now, you don't have to memorize that for the Pentest Plus, but you do need to know that Mimikatz is how we extract the SAM database and Windows credentials from a Windows operating system. All right, so that's chapter 10. To summarize, on the network side, we have man-in-the-middle attacks like ARP and DNS poisoning, and this is going to allow us for easy network traffic interception. For authentication, remember we have offline password tools like Hashcat or the noisy one like Hydra, right? And in Windows environments, we can do pass the hash, pass the ticket, and this is going to help us for lateral movement without ever needing to crack a password. And then finally, make sure that you know that Responder and Mimikatz are handy and essential for internal pen testing and what they are used for. Like Mimikatz being used for Windows credential dumping. All right, we made it all the way through. Chapter 10. If you're still with me, I will see you for chapter 11.